Good evening, everyone. This is the Black Post. Tonight, the message will be sent. No matter if you love it, no matter if you hate it, the message will be sent. The making of a slave. Now, I know a lot of us as Black people, we're so tired of this word. We're so tired of the word nigger. We're so tired of being discriminated upon. We're so tired of being racially profiled. We're so tired of being murdered. We're tired of protesting. We're tired of civil rights, but we must push through. But this, we have to understand our history of Africans, our history of foundational Black Americans. But the question is, with the history of knowing that a Portuguese Spanish Pope single-handedly back in the mid 1400s wrote legislation, wrote documentation to solely put Africans, Black people, solely into slavery. This history has been buried, but nonetheless, it is still public. A lot of us would like to say that we have been in slavery for 300, 400, 500 years, our ancestors, and today we're still in modern day slavery. But we need to understand how slavery occurred. And also, just because you steal people, just because you trade people from their homeland, does not automatically train their minds to be slaves. You have to make a slave, unless you just have a kidnapped person, a stolen person that you have been brutalizing and torturing in order for them to do your bidding. So just like anything else, there's a process that one must go through. But this process that our ancestors and we are still going through, the process of manipulation, the process of fear, is still occurring. So we have to go to the root of the problem in order to understand modern day slavery. Now, our history is vast. We understand that the Portuguese and the Spanish single-handedly started the slave trade. But anytime that wealth, polluting and plundering, Viking across the world, then came along the French and also the British by the way of the Dutch and people from Belgium. This is what we need to understand. So with that, I just want to give you some brief information and hopefully it give you some context of how they actually trained us to be submissive, to be feared and scared of them, to become slaves. Now, I'm going to get into something very intriguing that some of you might have heard and some of you may have not have heard. But let's start off with one thing before I get into this letter. When we came to this country, they stripped us of our name, of our religion, of our culture, and of our traditions. They gave us Christianity, which taught us to be submissive and nonviolent, which in turn had us to be captives and slaves, that we would not rise up and fight as a single unit for our freedom. Now there's history here and there that speaks about our freedom, like the Black Seminoles down in Florida. They fought for their freedom. That's a history that has been buried. That's a history that has been lost. Look up the Black Seminoles and the proclamation that they received to be free. the War of 1804 in Haiti, where the Haiti and the Aborigines of that land fought back the French and gained their independence. They fought for about 3 years, a very, very treacherous and bloody war. But nonetheless, they fight. But we, as foundational Black Americans, we had little skirmishes, we had little battles here and there, but ultimately we lost. See, you will see stories of Nat Turner and other prominent figures in foundational Black American history that they rose up, but there was always a coon. There was always a Sambo, a turncoat, a traitor that gave up, that cost us our revolution and ultimately our freedom. So how do we become so submissive? How do we become so scared to fight with any human being should already have? Well, let me give you this story. Let me tell you this story. Willie Lynch, the Willie Lynch letter. This is very much true. And as I read this, I want you to sit back and really just listen to the words, because then you will truly understand how they made most of us submissive, obedient slaves. And as we all know, in slavery, we got tortured, we got mutilated, we got dismembered, we got raped, burned, hung, drowned, any form of punishment. That is what occurred to our people. And we must understand this so it doesn't happen again. Now, this speech was to have been delivered by Willie Lynch on the bank of the James River in the colony of Virginia in 1712. Lynch was a British slave owner in the West Indies. He was invited to the colony of Virginia in 1712 to teach his methods to slave owners there. This is how the speech went from Willie Lynch. Greetings, gentlemen. I greet you here on the bank of the James River in the year of our Lord 1712. First, I shall thank you, the gentlemen of the colony of Virginia, for bringing me here. I'm here to help you solve some of your problems with slaves. Your invitation reached me on my modest plantation in the West Indies, where I have experimented with some of the newest and still the oldest methods for control of slaves. Ancient Rome would envy us if my program is implemented. As our boat sails south on the James River, named for our illustrious king, whose version of the Bible we cherish, I saw enough to know that your problem is not unique. While Rome used cords of wood as crosses for standing human bodies along its highways in great numbers, you are here using the tree and the rope on occasion. I caught the width of a dead slave hanging from a tree a couple miles back. You are not only losing valuable stock by hanging, you are having uprising, slaves are running away. Your crops are sometimes left in the fields too long for maximum profit. You suffer for occasional fires. Your animals are killed. Gentlemen, you know what your problem here is. I do not need to elaborate. I'm not here to discard your problems. I'm here to introduce you to a method in solving them. See, he had a solution for their slave problem to keep these slaves in order. In my bag here, I have a foolproof method for controlling your Black slaves. I guarantee every one of you that if installed correctly, it will control the slaves for at least 300 years. My method is simple. Any member of your family or your oversee can use it. I have outlined a number of differences among the slaves, and I take these differences and make them bigger. I use fear, distrust, and envy for control purposes. If any of us are getting this, he said he used fear, distrust, and envy. That means being jealous of one another and not trusting one another. I'll continue. These methods have worked on my modest plantation in the West Indies, and it will work throughout the South. Take this simple little list of differences and think about them. On top of my list is age, but it's there only because it starts with an A. The second is color or shade. There is intelligence, size, sex, sizes of plantations, status on plantations, attitude of owners, where the slaves live in the valley, on a hill, east, west, north, south, and have fine hair, coarse hair, or is tall or short. Now that you have a list of differences, I shall give you an outline of action. But before that, I shall assure you that distrust is stronger than trust, and envy is stronger than adulation, respect of admiration. The Black slaves, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry on and will become self-refueling and self-generating for hundreds of years. So this training has plagued the Black community not only hundreds of years, but more than 500 years. I'll continue. Maybe thousands, he says, maybe thousands of years. Don't forget, you must pitch the old black male versus the young black male, and the young black male against the old black male. You must use the dark-skinned slave versus the light-skinned slave, and the light-skinned slave versus the dark-skinned slave. You must use the female versus the male, and the male versus the female. This is still here today, where they have us fighting amongst our Black sisters. You must also have white servants and overseers who distrust all Blacks, but it's necessary that your slaves trust and depend on us. They must love, respect, and trust only us. Gentlemen, these kits are your keys to control. Use them. Have your wives and children use them. Never miss an opportunity. If used intensely for 1 year, the slaves themselves will remain perpetuated distrust. Thank you. Let's make a slave. Now, it was the interest and business of the slaveholders to study human nature and the slave nature in particular, with a view to practice results, and many of them attained astonishing proficiency in this direction. They had to deal not with earth, wood, and stone, but with men. And by every regard they had for their own safety and prosperity, they needed to know the material on which they were to work. Conscious of the injustice and wrong they were every hour perpetuating, and knowing what they themselves would do. Were they the victims of such wrongs? They were constantly looking for the first signs of dreaded retribution. They watched, therefore, with skill and practiced eyes, and learned to read with great accuracy the state of mind and heart of the slave through its sable face. Unusual sobriety, apparent abstraction, saltness, indifference indeed, and mood out of the common was afforded ground for suspicion and inquiry. Frederick Douglass' Let's Make a Slave is a study of the scientific process of man breaking and slave making. It describes the rationale and results of Anglo-Saxon ideas and methods of ensuring the master-slave relationship. Let's make a slave. Now, the original and development of a social being called the Negro. Let us make a slave. What do we need? First of all, we need a Black nigger man and a pregnant nigger woman and her baby nigger boy. Second, we will use the same basic principle that we use in breaking a horse, combined with some more sustaining factors. What we do with horse is that we break them from one form of life to another. This is what we reduce from the natural state in nature. Whereas nature provides them with the natural capacity to take care of their offspring, we break that natural string of independence from them and thereby create a dependency status so that we may be able to get from them useful production for our business and pleasure. See, capitalism was built off slavery. All the mixing of the races happened majority in slavery. That is what we need to understand. Now, how do they continue to do this? For fear that our future generations may not understand the principles of breaking both of the beasts together, the nigger and the horse, we understand the short-range planning economics results in periodic economic chaos, so that to avoid turmoil in the economy, it requires us to have breadth and depth and long-range comprehensive planning. Articulating both skill, sharp perception, we lay down the following principles for long-range comprehension economic planning. Both horse and niggers are no good to the economy in the wild or natural state. Both must be broken and tied together for orderly production. For orderly future, special and particular attention must be paid to the female and the youngest offspring. Both must be crossbred to produce a variety in division of labor. Both must be taught to respond to a peculiar new language. Psychologically and physical instruction of containment must be created for both. We hold the 6 cardinal principles as truth to be self-evident based upon following disclosure concerning the economics of breaking and tying the horse and the nigger together, all inclusive of the 6 principles laid down above. Now note, neither principle alone will suffice for good economics. All principles must be employed for orderly good of the nation. Accordingly, both a wild horse and a wild of nature, niggers, is dangerous even if captured, for they will have the tendency to seek their customary freedom, and in doing so might kill you in your sleep. You cannot rest. They sleep while you are awake, and they are awake while you are asleep. They are dangerous near the family house and requires too much labor to watch them away from the house. Above all, you cannot get them to work in a natural state. Hence, both the horse and the nigger must be broken. This is breaking them from one form of mental life to another. Keep the body, take the mind. Keep the body, take the mind. So in other words, break the will to resist. Now the breaking process is the same for both the horse and the nigger, only slightly varying in degrees. But as we said before, there is an art in long-range economic planning. You must keep your eye and thoughts on the female and the offspring. And the offspring of the horse and the nigger. A brief discourse in offspring development will shed light on the key to sound economic principles. Pay little attention to the generation of original breaking, but concentrate on future generations. Therefore, if you break the female mother, she will break the offspring in its early years of development. And when the offspring is old enough to work, she will deliver it up to you. For her normal female protective tendencies will have been lost in the original breaking process. They broke the mom in order for the mom to break the offspring, the child, for that child too can be a good slave. For example, take the case of the wild stud horse, a female horse and an already infant horse, and compare the breaking process with 2 captured nigger males in their natural state while they're pregnant. The nigger woman with her infant offspring, take the stud horse, break him for limited containment, completely break the female horse until she becomes very gentle, whereas you or anybody can ride her in comfort. Breed the mar and the stud until you have the desired offspring. Then you can turn the stud to freedom until you need him again. Train the female horse whereby she will eat out of your hand, and she will in turn train the infant horse to eat out of your hand. When it comes to breaking the uncivilized nigger, use the same process, but vary the degree and step up the pressure so as to do a complete reversal of the mind. Take the mind, you will have the body. Take the meanest and most restless nigger, strip him of his clothes in front of the remaining male niggers, the female and the nigger infant. Tar and feather him. Tie each leg to a different horse facing opposite direction. Set him afire and beat both horses to pull him apart in front of the remaining niggers. Let me say that again. This is also another form of butt breaking. Take the meanest and most restless nigger, strip him of his clothes in front of the remaining male niggers, the female and the nigger infant, tar and feather him, tie each leg to a different horse, face in opposite direction, set him afire, and beat both horses to pull him apart in front of the remaining niggers. The next step is to take a bullwhip and beat the remaining nigger males to the point of death in front of the female and the infant. Don't kill him, but put the fear of God in him, for he can be useful for future breeding. Very interesting. Now, take the female. This is how you break the black nigger woman. Take the female and run a series of tests on her to see if she will submit to your desires willingly. Test her in every way because she is the most important factor for good economics. If she shows any sign of resistance in submitting completely to your will, do not hesitate to use the bullwhip on her to exact the last bit out of her. Take care not to kill her, for in doing so, you spoil good economics. And what he means by that is she is the bearer of more slaves. So don't kill her because she is useful. That is what he is referring to. When in complete submission, she would train her offsprings in the early years to submit to labor when they become of age. Understanding is the best thing. Therefore, we shall go deeper into this area of the subject matter concerning what we have produced here in the breaking process of the female nigger. We have reversed the relationship. In her natural uncivilized state, she will have a stronger dependency on the uncivilized nigger male, and she will have a limited protective tendency toward her independent male offspring and will raise male offspring to be dependent like her. Nature had provided for this type of balance. We reserve nature by burning and pulling a civilized nigger apart and bull whooping the other to the point of death, all in her presence. By her being left alone, unprotected, and the male image destroyed, the ordeal caused her to move from her psychological dependent state to a frozen independent state. In this frozen psychological state of independence, she will raise her male and female offspring in reverse roles. For fear of the young male's life, she will psychologically train him to be mentally weak and dependent, but physically strong. But she has become psychologically independent. She would train her female offspring to be psychologically independent. What have you got? You've got the nigger woman out front and the nigger male behind and scared. This is a perfect situation of sound sleep in economics. Before the breaking process, we had to be alertly on guard at all times. Now we can sleep soundly, for out of frozen fear, his woman stands guard for us. He cannot get past her early slave molding process. He is a good tool. Now ready to be tied to the horse at a tender age. By the time a nigger boy reaches the age of 16, he is soundly broken in, ready for a long life, sound and efficient work, and the reproduction of a unit of good labor force. This is very interesting. Continually through the breaking of uncivilized savage niggers by throwing the nigger female savage into a frozen psychological state of independence, by killing protective male image and by creating a submissive, dependent mind of the Negro male slave, we have created an orbiting cycle that turns on its own axis forever, unless a phenomenon occurs and reshifts the position of the male and female slaves. We show what we mean by example. Take the case of the two economic slave units and examine the close. We breed two nigger males with two nigger females. Then we take the nigger male away from them and keep them moving and working. Say one nigger female bears a nigger female and the other bears a nigger male, both nigger females being without influence of the nigger male image, frozen with an independent psychology, will raise their offspring into reverse positions. The one with the female offspring will teach her to be like herself, independent and negotiable. We negotiate with her, through her, by her, negotiate her at her will. The one with the nigger male offspring, she's being frozen subconsciously, fear for his life. Will raise him to be mentally dependent and weak, but physically strong. So in other words, body over mind. Basically, he's saying we're training the female to take away the masculinity of the male in his mind, but his body, because he's a man, is still strong. I'll continue. Now, in a few years, when these two offsprings become fertile for early reproduction, we will mate and breed them and continue the cycle that is good, sound, and long-range comprehensive planning. This is all based upon economics. As he said before, this is about economics and pleasure. Earlier, we talked about the non-economic good of the horse and the nigger in the wild or natural state. We talked out the principle of breaking and tying them together for orderly production. Furthermore, we talked about paying particular attention to the female savage and her offspring for orderly future planning. Then more recently, we stated that by reversing the position of the male and the female savages, we create an orbiting cycle that turns on its own axis forever unless a phenomenon occurred and reshifts the position of the male and the female savages. Our experts warn us about the possibility of this phenomenon occurring. For they say that the mind has a strong drive to correct and recorrect itself over the period of time. If it can touch some substantial original historical base, and they advertise us the best way to deal with the phenomenon is to shave off the brute's mental history and create a multiplicity of phenomena of illusions, so that each illusion will twirl in its own orbit, something similar to floating balls in a vacuum. This creation of phenomena of illusion entails the principle of crossbreeding the nigger and the horse, as we stated above, the purpose of which is to create a diversified division of labor. You hear that? Diversified division of labor, thereby creating different levels of labor and different values of illusion at each connecting level of labor, the result of which is the severance of points of original beginnings for each spirit illusion. Since we feel that the subject matter may get more complicated as we proceed in laying down our economic plan concerning the purpose, reason, and effect of crossbreeding horses and niggers, we shall lay down the following definition terms for future generations. Orbiting cycle means a thing turning in a given path. Axis mean upon which or around which a body turns. Phenomenon means something beyond ordinary conception and inspires awe and wonder. This means a great number, means a globe. Crossbreeding a horse means taking a horse and breeding it with an ass, and you get a dumb, backward, ass-longed-headed mule that is not reproductive nor productive by itself. Cross-breeding niggers mean taking so many drops of good white blood and putting them into as many nigger women as possible. See, these rapings were by design. They were getting trained how to divide us. How to divide us. Again, crossbreeding niggers mean taking so many drops of good white blood and putting them into as many nigger women as possible, varying the drops by the various tone that you want, and then letting them breed with each other until another cycle of color appears as you desire, meaning slaves were getting lighter, browner, rather than your dark slaves. So you have division in labor. What this means is this: put the niggers and the horse in a breeding pot, mix some acids and some good white blood, and what do you get? You get a mix of colors of ass backward, unusual niggers running, tied to backward as long-headed mules, the one productive of itself, the other sterile. The one constant, the other dying. We keep the nigger constant, for we may replace the mules for another two. Now, both mule and nigger tied together, not knowing where they all came from, and neither being productive for itself nor without each other, meaning you will be estranged from the people you actually came off the boat with. Now, crossbreeding completed. For further severance from their original beginning, we must completely annihilate the mother tongue of both the new nigger and the new mule and institute a new language that involves the new life's work of both. You know, language is a peculiar institution. It leads to the heart of people. The more a foreigner knows about the language of another country, the more he is able to move through all levels of that society. Therefore, if that foreigner is an enemy of the country, to the extent that he knows the body of language, to that extent the country is vulnerable to attack or an invasion of a foreign culture. For example, if you take a slave, if you teach him all about your language, he will know all your secrets, and he is then the one no more a slave, for you can't fool him any longer. And being a fool is one of the basic ingredients of any incidents to the maintenance of the slavery system. For example, if you told a slave that he must perform in getting out of his crops, he knows the language well. He would know that our crops didn't mean our crops and that the slavery system will break down, for he would relate on the basis of what our crops really mean. So you have to be careful in setting up the new language, for the slaves will soon be in your house, talking to you as man to man, and that is death to our economic system. In addition, the definition of words and terms are only a minute a part of the process. Values are created and transported by communication through the body of language. A total society has many interconnected value systems. All the values in the society have bridges of language to connect them for orderly working in the society. For these languages bridges, these many value systems will sharply clash and cause internal strife or civil war. The degree of the conflict being determined by the magnitude of issues or relative opposing strength in whatever form. For example, if you put a slave in a hog pen and train him to live there and incorporate him to value it as a way of life completely, the biggest problem you will have out of him is that he will worry you about provisions to keep the hog pen clean, or the same hog pen and make a slip and incorporate something in his language whereby he comes to value a house more than he does his hog pen. You got a problem. He will soon be in your house. This is the making of a slave, ladies and gentlemen. This is how you buck break the African Americans. This is how you buck break foundational Black Americans. This is how you emasculate African Americans descended of slaves. This is what they did. Let me move on. The 10 Precepts of American Slavery Jurisprudence. This work is by Leon Higginbotham, and this is what we need to understand. Over the last 2 decades, he's tried to determine whether I could categorize a list of premises or precepts that taken together could explain the whole institution of colonial and antebellum slavery and the race relations law of that era. The race relations law of that era. Ultimately, I concluded, for those Americans in power, there were severe basic premises, goals, and implicit agreements concerning the institution of slavery that at one defined the nature of American slavery and directed how it should be administered. Sometimes the premises and goals were articulated precisely in statutes, judicial opinions, and executive orders. At other times, it appears that there was an implicit agreement on these principles, but whether or not articulated as formal rules of law. I have defined a general consensus concerning principles or premises that lead to the legitimization of perpetuation of slavery and of racism in America during the colonial and antebellum periods. Slaveholders, legislators, judges, and other public officials displayed a common understanding on the issues of race and slavery that catered to their shared economic interests and political views. If you notice, everything about slavery was predicated upon economics, politics, and pleasure. Now, this common understanding created a simple university of the rules. Once established, these rules formed the logical and foundation for American slavery culture for more than 200 years. It is breakdown of those components making up this university of the rules that I can call the 10 precepts of American slavery jurisprudence. As we shall see, even after the abolish of slavery, some aspect of those precepts pertaining to the alleged inferiority of blacks and desire to make black powerless still continue to haunt America. This is very intriguing, ladies and gentlemen, because we need to understand it even after 1865, when we were so-called freed from slavery. And most people jump right to Jim Crow, but the issue with that is they still father the institution of obedient slaves because we returned to the same plantations in which we came from. And we are still suffering from psychological discord, from slavery, from our mothers and fathers, because this was passed down generation after generation ever since Willie Lynch taught our forefathers how to continue to make a slave to white people in the system of white supremacy, to be slaves to this nation. Because we understand, even though slavery started officially around 1444, 1445 in Portugal and Spain, slavery in America is around 266 years. From 1619 to around 1865, I believe 1863, 1865 is when it got ratified. But let's get into the 10 precepts of American slavery. 1, inferiority, presume, preserve, protect, and defend the ideal of the superiority of whites and the inferiority of blacks. Number 2, property. Define the slave as the master's property. Maximize the master's economic interests. Disregard the humanity of the slave except when it serves the master's interests, and deny slaves the fruits of their labor. This is how a lot of Sambos came about. A lot of coons came about. Disregard the humanity of the slave except when it serves the master's interests. Number 3, powerlessness. Keep blacks, whether slave or free, as powerless as possible, so they will be submissive and dependent in every respect, not only to the master, but to whites in general. Limit blacks' accessibility to the courts and subject blacks to inferior system of justice with lesser rights and protection and greater punishment than whites. Utilize violence and the powers of government to assure the submissiveness of blacks. Is that not happening today, ladies and gentlemen? That we're powerless in our current judicial system? Number 4, racial purity. Always preserve white male sexual dominance. Always preserve white male sexual dominance. Draw an arbitrary racial line and preserve white racial purity as thus defined. Tolerate sexual relations between white men and black women. Tolerate it between white men and black women. Punish severely sexual relationship between white women and non-white men. With respect to children who are products of interracial sexual relations, the freedom or enslavement of the black child is determined by the status of the mother. Manuism and free blacks. Limit and discourage manumission in order to minimize the number of free blacks in the state. Confine free blacks to a status as close as possible to slavery. Number 6, family. Recognize no rights of the black family. Destroy the unity of the black family. Deny slaves the right of marriage. Demean and degrade black women, black men, black parents, and black children, and then condemn them for their conduct and state of mind. 7, education and culture. Deny blacks any education. Deny them knowledge of their culture and make it a crime to teach those who are slaves how to read or write. Number 8, religion. Recognize no rights of slaves to define and practice their own religion, to choose their own religious leaders, or to worship with other blacks. Encourage them to adopt the religion of the white master and teach them that God is white and will reward the slave who obeys the commands of his master here on earth. Use religion to justify the slave status on earth. Number 9, liberty, resistance. Limit blacks' opportunity to resist. Limit blacks' opportunity to resist, bear arms, rebel, or flee. Curtail their freedom of movement, freedom of association, and freedom of expression. Deny blacks the right to vote and to participate in government. Number 10, by any means possible. Support all measures, including the use of violence, which maximize the profitability of slavery and which legitimize racism. Oppose, by the use of violence if necessary, all measures will advocate the abolishment of slavery or the dimension of white supremacy. You're probably asking yourself, why the 10 precepts? The 10 precepts of American slavery jurisprudence may call to mind 2 questions. First, is there any hierarchy significance in order of the 10 precepts? And second, why were they cast as 10 rather than 9? I can further imagine someone asking, is precept 5 more significant than precept 9? In my opinion, the first 3 precepts on inferiority, property, and powerlessness are the sine qua non, while precepts 4 to 10 are exemplary, or in some respects, modification of the first 3. Each of the last 7 precepts embody some of the major portions of the rationale and substance of the first 3. Now, these precepts are not intended to be like the basic elements in chemistry, where each element has a reducible atomic structure. The atomic structure of a precept cannot be so sharply defined, while others might prefer to draw the lines differently by increasing or reducing the number of precepts. These differences are matters of declination or degree and do not warrant an assumption that because it is difficult to draw a line, No line should be drawn. This is how white supremacy continues to shape us as slaves, even in modern day times. Whether it be the Willie Lynch letter, or as his brother wrote, the 10 Precepts of American Slavery, Just Prudence. And just to leave you guys with a little more information, I would like to inform you that people love to teach Black people. People love to tell us, foundational Black Americans, about the 13th Amendment. This reminds me of Joe Biden's 1994 crime bill, the one legal legislation that incarcerated our grandfathers, our fathers, our uncles, our aunts, our mothers. You don't have to believe me, family. I encourage you to go out and search for that information. I encourage you to gain knowledge. But I tell you this, I'm going to read this very short passage very carefully so you understand exactly what I'm talking about. Joe Biden knows exactly what this amendment says. Bill Clinton knows exactly what this amendment says, because we need to understand that Joe Biden didn't write the 1994 crime bill by himself, but he was a co-author, but he was the leader of it, and Bill Clinton signed it into law. The 13th Amendment simply states, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are the key words that we have to become very, very familiar with. When I look at Joe Biden's LIFT plan for Black American, when I look at Donald Trump Platinum Plan for Black Americans, I see the words for all Americans, minorities, people of color. Let me inform you, they're not speaking terms in only terms of foundational Black Americans, African Americans, Black Americans, African Americans, Black Americans. Then when you start to talk about people of color, they also include Hispanics. They also include Asians. They also include East Indians. And when they talk about minorities, that's all of those people included, as well as white females. So whatever plan they have for Black America, these are not plans. These are garbage. This is trash. It's rubbish. It is definitely rubbish. They pander to us every 4 years. And now that we've been marching in the street and protesting police brutality, justice, Black Lives Matter, say their name, we're going to be in the same predicament when everybody goes to the polls, because they believe that slavery no longer exists, but slavery still exists, family. And it doesn't matter what white supremacist in office, whether it be your Donald Trump, which everybody is blaming for race riots, whether it be Joe Biden, which we like to forego his 1994 crime bill, him being in politics for 47 years and has done nothing to help Black people. But now he's fit for presidency. We already have a president who's not fit for the presidency. They're both white supremacists. They're both on code. That is why that every minority group can get what they want, but we cannot. Anytime a Black person brings a reparation, There's some Sambos and there's a lot of non-Black people fighting against that. But when you go and you dig deep into history, and quite frankly, under the Obama administration, reparations were given to two groups of people. I want you to go look into that. I want you to go look into $12 million given to a particular group that's not even from this country in the form of reparations, solely for that group. No one else, not Asians, not Hispanics, not Blacks, not whites, but for a particular group that's not even from this country. They come here by the way of Germany. I want you to go do that research, family. And I want you to understand, not only are we deserving of reparations and justice, that our ancestors died for us to have it. They generated anywhere between 14 and 15 trillion dollars to make this the most powerful and richest country in the world. And foundational Black Americans have not received not one dime of that money, not one benefit of slavery. But every time we have people fighting for us that look like us, we would like to shun and break them down and tell and convince us to go vote for our white slave masters. We would like to lift them up on high. And we need to understand that this training is generations old. They broke the Black male image for the female can lead the home, knowing that is an opposition of the natural stance of any household. They took away our religion. They took away our native tongue and gave us their religion of a white Jesus. In their culture, we are now strangers that are from a distant land. Not only do we not know the land in which we come from, sometimes I feel like we don't even know ourselves. This is the Black Post. This evening, the message was sent. No matter if you loved it, no matter if you hated, the message was delivered. Have a good night.